In this video, we are going to be talking all about percents. In the first part of the video, I'm going to be talking about how you go from decimals to fractions to percents, because these will be really important things to know to solve percent problems. So if you feel pretty comfortable with this already, around a little bit after the 8-minute mark of the video is where I actually get into the percent problems. So you can skip ahead to that if you already feel comfortable with changing percents to decimals and vice versa. But if you do think you need practice with that, you can watch the beginning part of the video. Of course, feel free, like all my videos, skip around if you need to. Go to the specific part you need help with, skip ahead, skip around. This video is to help you understand what you need help with. First, we are going to talk about what is a percent. It's important that you understand percents and the relationship between fractions, decimals, and percents to then be able to solve problems that are asking you about percents. So first of all, let's break apart the word percent. In the word percent, we have two parts, per and cent. Cent means 100, like a century is 100 years. A cent is 1 out of 100 in a dollar. Per means for every. So if we break apart the word percent, it literally means for every 100. So if I had this, for example, 56% of the cars are red. This literally means for every 100 of the cars that you have, 56 of them will be red. That's what 56% of the cars are red means. So let's look now at how this relates to decimals and fractions. So we have this triangle here that goes from fractions, decimals to percents, back to fractions. This helps us to know how we can go from one to another. So let's stick with this example, 56%. If I have 56% and I want to change it to a fraction, all I have to do is write the percent over 100. So 56% as a fraction is equal to 56 over 100. It's as simple as that. I could also, though, simplify this fraction. Divide both by 2. I get 28 out of 50. I can divide by 2 again and get 14 over 25. So 56% is also equal to 14 over 25. We can also take this now from the fraction to the decimal. We do that by dividing. We divide the numerator by the denominator, the top by the bottom. So I'll do my work over here. 56 divided by 100. So 100 does not fit inside of 56. So what I do in this case is I add 0.0 because 56 and 56.0 are worth the same amount. I'll bring my decimal straight up. Then I think, how many times does 100 go into 560? 5 times. I'd have 60 left over, so I still need to keep going. I'll add another 0 to the end and bring it down. 100 goes into 600 6 times. And there's nothing left over, and so then I'm done. So as a decimal, 56% is equal to 56 hundredths. You can also take just a percent and go straight to a decimal as well without having to go through the middle step of the fraction. You can go backwards on the triangle too. So if we're going backwards, we're going to be doing the opposite. So to go from a decimal to a percent, we multiply by 100. So the other way, percent to decimal, we're going to divide by 100. So for example, if I have 72%, to make this a decimal, all I have to do is divide it by 100. So I'll do my work right here. 72 divided by 100. 100 does not fit inside of 72. I'll add 0.0, bring up my decimal. 100 goes into 720, 7 times, 20 left over. I'll add another 0. 100 goes into 200, 2 times with nothing left over. So as a decimal, 72% equals 72 hundredths. So maybe you have noticed that the decimal and the percent look very similar, where we have both 72 and 72. We just changed the decimal. So here's a quick rule to help you. If you have a percent and you want to make it a decimal, all you have to do is take the decimal point where it is, we're at 72 wholes, 72%, and bring it 2 to the left, and you have your decimal. If you have a decimal to start with, let's say 56 hundredths, and you want to make it a percent, all you have to do is move it the opposite way, 2 to the right, and you would get 56%. Here are some example problems to try. So these problems, I've focused on decimals and percents. Fractions are also important, but when we're solving percent problems, we usually use decimals and percents more. So I'm not going to focus on the fractions as much in this video, but in another video, you can find how to convert between all 3 fractions, decimals, and percents. So anyway, here are 8 practice problems for you to try. You're going to write these 4 here as decimals. They are written in percents. You need to write them as decimals. And here we have 4 decimals, and you'll need to write them as percents. So you can pause the video and solve the problems. When you think you have your answers, play the video again to check them. Go ahead and pause the video. These are the answers that you should have gotten. 63 hundredths, 245 thousandths, 22 10,000ths, and 7 hundredths. So notice how on each of these, all I did is I moved the decimal 2 places to the left, because to go from a percent to a decimal, I divide by 100, which, as we talked about on the slide before, a quick trick for this is just move the decimal over 2 places to the left, and then you get your answer. For the percents, you should have had 35%, 2%, 33 3/10%, and 61 hundredths percent. Notice on this one, I moved the decimal 2 times again, but because I'm going from a decimal to a percent, I move the decimal point 2 places to the right. I go the opposite direction. And so I just move it 2 places to the right, and that's my new spot, and I add my percent sign. So if you didn't get any of these right, see if you can figure out how you can fix your mistakes. So now that we have talked about how we can relate decimals, percents, and fractions, but especially decimals and percents, we can solve percent problems. So in a percent problem, it's going to be asking you to figure out the percent of a certain number to equal some number. So when this is the case, here's an example problem, 20% of 40. So here's what I like to do. Whenever I have a percent problem, I set up this outline, blank percent of blank is blank. So every percent problem is going to look like this, and you can fill in with the information that you know. So right now I know the percent, it's 20% of what number? Well, I know it's going to be 20% of 40. But I don't know what it equals. So that's what I'm trying to figure out, is what goes in this spot right here. So in order to solve this, this is what I need to do. I have the word of here. We've talked about before with fractions, which we just talked now about how percents and fractions, we can switch between the two. They can be equal. So if it's fractions, percents, decimals, whatever, if I have the word of, it always means times. So this problem is really like doing 20% times 40. So we can't really do 20% times 40, but what we can do is make this percent here, make it a decimal, and then multiply that decimal by 40. So in order to change 20% to a decimal, we've practiced this. All I have to do is move the decimal point 2 spots to the left. I'm dividing it by 100. So I would get 20 hundredths. Then I'll fill in times 40. And then once I solve that, I'll get my answer. So let's do that now. 40 times 20 hundredths. 0 times 0, 0 times 4, 2 times 0, 2 times 4. Now I'll add. Then I have 2 digits after the decimal in my problem, so I will have 2 in my answer. So in the end, 20% of 40 is 8. And that is my answer to this problem. So here's a problem that we're going to work through together. So in order to do that, find a piece of paper, something to write on, write down this problem, 35% of 200. So to solve this problem, the first thing that we do is we fill in these blanks with what we know. So to start off, why don't you try it, see if you can figure out how to fill in the blanks of this sentence here. Hopefully you filled the blanks like this. We know the percent, 35. We know what we're finding 35% of. We just don't know what it is, what it equals in the end. So now we're going to figure out 35% of 200. So see if you can remember, what do we do first? Hopefully you remembered that we take the decimal in the 35% and move it 2 to the left to make it a decimal, 35 hundredths. And hopefully you also remembered that of means times. So 35% or 35 hundredths times 200. So go ahead, pause the video, see if you can figure out what this equals, then play it again to check your work. Hopefully you got that 35% of 200 is 70. If you didn't get it right, compare your work to mine and see if you can figure out where you made your mistake. Here's another type of problem you might see, something like this. 20 is 30% of what number? Let's fill out our sentence here and see if we can figure out what the difference is between this problem and the couple we looked at just before this. So let's fill in with what we know. Do we know the percent? Yep, 30% of what number? Do we know what we are finding 30% of? It doesn't say find 30% of 20, so we should not put a 20 in here. That would be wrong. We're not doing 30% of 20. So we are going to have to leave that spot blank. We do know in the end, though, that it's going to be 20. It says 20 is. So 30% of some mystery number. What number? We don't know yet. It is 20. So we can solve this a pretty similar way as the other problems. The first thing we need to do is we need to change this percent to a decimal. So I take the decimal point and I move it 2 to the left. So I have 30 hundredths. The word of, I know, means times. I don't know what I'm multiplying 30 hundredths by though, but I know in the end it's going to equal 20. So now my job is to figure out what this blank would be. Well, I know that when I'm multiplying, to reverse that, I can divide. So if I don't know what this number is, I can do 20 divided by 30 hundredths to get my answer. So it would look like this. 20 divided by 30 hundredths. That should help me to get this answer here. So now I'll just solve this doing my normal decimal division. If you're a little unsure of how to do this, I do have a video as well on how to divide decimals. So first I need to make a whole number on the outside. So I will move my decimal point 2 spots to the right. Now if I did 2 to the right on the outside, I need to do 2 to the right as well on the inside. So there's my new decimal spots. I'll fill in with zeros and now just divide. So 30, it can't go inside of 2 or 20, but it does fit inside of 200. Fits inside of 200 6 times. That would be 180. So if I took away 180 from 200, I'd have 20 left over. Now I'll bring down the next 0. Again, it goes in 6 times. I'd have 20 left over. I don't have 0 left, but I'm done with all the numbers I can bring down. So I'm going to add 0.0. It doesn't change the value of my number. So now I can bring down another 0. Draw my decimal point straight up. Again, it goes in 6 times with 20 left over. Add another 0, bring it down. Again, it goes in 6 times with 20 left over. So I'm noticing I have a pattern. This seems to be going on and on and on and on. And this is actually going to continue on forever. So if I have 66.6666666666666 that goes on forever, I can just go like this. If you write a line on top of the decimal numbers, that means that it goes on forever. So in the end, what I figured out is 30% of 66 and 66 hundredths repeating is 20. Here's another type of problem you might see, something like this. 20 is 40% of what number? Let's fill out our sentence with what we know to see if we can figure out what's the difference between this problem and the couple we looked at right before. So first, do I know the percent? Yep, it tells me in the problem 40%. So now 40% of, does it say what I'm finding 40% of? Well, I see the word of here. It says of what number? It says 40% of what number? So I don't think I know what I'm finding 40% of. Notice how I didn't write here 20. It does not say in the problem 40% of 20. It doesn't say that. So I would not write a 20 there. If you put a 20 there, that would be wrong. We're not finding 40% of 20. So I think I'm going to leave that blank for now. Let's keep going. So 40% of something is, well, it says right here, 20 is. So this is going to be a 20. It is 20. So 40% of something is 20. So now this is the problem that I'm trying to solve. I'm trying to figure out what this number is. So this is what makes this problem a little bit different, is that now I'm trying to figure out what am I finding 40% of? I don't know. And so the way I solve it is slightly different. I'm going to start off still by changing this percent to a decimal. by moving the decimal point 2 spots to the left. So that makes it 40 hundredths. Of still means times. But now the difference is I don't know what I'm finding. 40 hundredths times what? I don't know. So I'll leave that blank. And then is means equals, and I know it is 20, or it equals 20. So in order to solve this problem, I can think about this. The relationship between multiplication and division is that they're opposites. So I can figure out this number here by doing 20 divided by 40 hundredths, just like this. 20 divided by 40 hundredths. So now we'll solve this just by doing normal decimal division. If you aren't quite comfortable yet with decimal division, I do have a video that walks you through it, so you can always refer to that video if you still need some more practice with this decimal division. So I'm going to walk through this kind of quickly now. On the outside, I need to make a whole number, so I will move the decimal point 2 spots to the right. So since I moved it 2 to the right on the outside, I move it 2 to the right on the inside. I bring my decimal straight up and I fill in the spots with zeros. Now I will solve. 40 does not go into 2, 40 does not go into 20, but 40 does go into 200 5 times. 40 times 5, well, I know 4 times 5 is 20, add a 0, so 40 times 5 would be 200. So if 40 times 5 is 200, I'll take away 200 from this 200, which would mean I'd have 0 left over. I bring down my next 0. How many times does 40 go into 0? 0 times. 40 times 0 is 0. 0 minus 0 is 0. So in the end, my answer is going to be 50. 40% of 50 is 20. So the answer to this question, 20 is 40% of what number? 50. We are going to walk through this problem together. So once again, have a piece of paper out and write down this problem. 16 is 20% of what number? So in order to solve, we need to fill out our sentence with the information that we know. So first of all, the percent, then of blank is blank. Take a second, see if you can figure out what would go where. Hopefully you filled it in like this. 20% of blank is 16. Notice I'm not doing, it does not say 20% of 16. It says 20% of what number? So I don't know what I'm finding 20% of. So I'm going to leave this blank. Now see if you can remember what is the next step that we do. The next step is that we make 20% a decimal. So it becomes 20 hundredths. Then of means times. So 20 hundredths times blank is 16. Now how would we set up our problem to figure out what this equals right there? We're going to divide 16 divided by 20 hundredths. So go ahead and solve what this equals, and you can play the video. So pause it, the video, solve, play the video again when you have your answer to check to see if you're right. Hopefully you got your answer to be 80. 16 is 20% of what number? 80. If you got that wrong, compare your work to mine, see if you can figure out where you made your mistake. Here are 4 example problems for you to try. So I've mixed up the 2 different types of percent problems that you might see. So you're going to have to read really carefully. I also wrote this blank in the sentence that you need to fill out on the first one to remind you to do this. So I gave this as a clue for you on the first one. You should be doing it on all 4 though to help you solve to get your answer. So you're going to pause the video, solve these 4 questions. When you think you have your answers, play the video again to check them. So in the end, these are the answers you should have gotten. 48, 27, 6 75/100ths, and 14. Notice how I filled out the sentence for every single one of my problems. It really helped me to figure out what I know and what I need to figure out. Then I could change my percent to a decimal and pretty quickly solve. So make sure that every single time you have a percent problem, you're filling out the blanks of a sentence like this. If you got something wrong, check your work, make sure you have everything that you need, see where you might have made a mistake. Lastly, you can use percents to solve word problems. Here's an example. A suitcase's weight is 20% clothes. The suitcase weighs 50 pounds. How much do the clothes weigh? So once again, we're going to use our blanks with the sentence to figure out what we know and what we need to figure out. So blank percent of blank is blank. So first of all, we know our percent, 20%. So it's 20% of something. Do we know the total amount of the whole thing? Well, yes, we know that the total amount of the whole suitcase is 50. So we're doing 20% of the suitcase. 20% of the suitcase is clothes. So 20% of how much the suitcase weighs. The suitcase weighs 50 pounds. So we're finding 20% of 50. 20% of the whole suitcase is clothes. And we know that the suitcase is 50 pounds, so now we need to figure out how many pounds the clothes are. That's what it equals in the end. So we solve this just like normal. We change the percent to a decimal. We know of means times. So we're doing 20 hundredths times 50. I have 2 decimals in my problem, so I'll have 2 in my answer. So in the end, let's make sure we have a label. My answer would be 10 pounds. The clothes weigh 10 pounds. Here is another example. Marcia drinks 2 cups of hot chocolate. This is 40% of the total hot chocolate she made. How much hot chocolate did she make? We're going to do the same procedure where we fill in the blanks. Notice how every time I'm working with percents, I fill in these blanks here. So first of all, I know my percent, 40% of blank. So let's think in this problem, what do we know and what do we not know? Well, we know she drinks 2 cups of hot chocolate, and it says this is 40% of the total hot chocolate she made. So 40% of the total is 2 cups. So 40% of the total, so of the total is the amount that she drank. Do we know the total amount of hot chocolate she made all together? No, we don't know that yet. So we are going to have to leave this blank. Then we do know, though, that the amount that she drank is 2 cups. So I can put a 2 right here. Now I'm going to solve like before, where I always change my percent to a decimal. of always means times. I don't know what I'm multiplying by, but I do know in the end it will equal 2. So now to solve this, I'm going to divide. So in the end, we figured out that Marcia made 5 cups of hot chocolate. Notice how I wrote a label or a unit with my answer. So 5 cups of hot chocolate is the answer. Here are 4 word problems for you to try on your own now. So remember what we did to solve the problems before, and read carefully. You know different pieces of information in every problem. So you're going to solve these 4 problems, solving them how we practiced earlier in the video, and then so you can pause the video and do that. When you have your answers, play the video again to check your work. These are the answers you should have gotten. Make sure you have a label. That's part of the answer that you need, is the label. 30 minutes, 3 problems, 3 84/100 cups of water, and 10 miles. So you should have filled out this sentence with the information that you knew, and that helped you to know how to solve the problem. We didn't know how many total minutes there were on the show, but we did know there were 60 total problems. We knew you were making 12 total cups of orange juice, and you knew that, and you did not know the total all around the park. So that's how I thought about these problems when I was filling out the sentences. And that is going to be the end of this video. Hopefully you got a lot of practice in with percent problems and you understand it a little bit better now.